Good afternoon. Hi, everyone. As Ha mentioned, I spent 6 years at eBay, and while I was at eBay, I spent five actually in Shanghai. So I'm going to spend about 15 minutes or so today to share some lessons learned from my experience in China. First, raise your hand if you remember or watched the opening ceremony of the Beijing Olympic Games in 2008. Yes, a lot of people. Any impressions? What do you guys remember about the opening ceremony? Uniformity. What else? Drums? Yes, a lot of drumming. Exactly. Anything else? The floor? Yeah, it was very high tech, right? It was pretty amazing. So I was in China, in Shanghai at the time, and like a lot of people around the world, I was watching intensely. But for me, as someone who was born in China, grew up in the States, and then working in China, I had some mixed emotions watching the opening ceremony. On the one hand, my heart could just burst with pride. It was the first time to see my culture, my history being celebrated on such a massive scale and broadcast to billions of homes around the world. And then on the other hand, as an American employee working for an American company and competing alongside Chinese companies, it was a reminder that, boy, it's going to be tough in China. And definitely, it was very, very difficult in China. So, why was I in China in the first place? Well, in 2003, eBay acquired a local company in China called EachNet. At the time, EachNet had 80% market share. It was by far the dominant e commerce leader in China. And eBay was applying its international acquisition playbook. Every market before China, it would always acquire the local dominant market leader, spend time to migrate that company onto the global platform, and then invest in that company and see the hockey stick do its magic. It worked in Germany, it worked in France, it worked in the UK, Spain, Italy, every single market. And in China, it seemed obvious that it would work again because EachNet had 80% market share. But China was special. And it was special because the size and the potential of the market. And in fact, Meg famously said, China can be eBay's largest market on a global basis. And we want to do everything we can to maintain our number one position. And she meant it. She spent the summer of 2005 in Shanghai. She invested significant amount of resources into the China market. And we also spent a lot of time recruiting experts and sending expats like myself to work in China. Obviously, I was the secret weapon. Uh, in fact, at the time, Chris Molliwatt, who's here in the audience somewhere, we would joke in order to prioritize any of our projects, all we had to do was add China to the title of the project. And if we added China somewhere in the description, and so therefore we would call these projects China, China, China projects. And right away it would be prioritized. That's how important the China market meant for eBay. So what happened? Well, a few years later, in 2007, eBay actually withdrew from the China market. It shut down eBay EachNet, and at the time, from 2004 to 2007, the market share eroded from over 80% to 15%. Hashtag sad, right? So what happened? We spent all of these resources, millions of dollars of investment, and we eroded our market share to 15%. So Meg, unfortunately, wasn't able to maintain our market share, but she was absolutely right about the potential of China. So 10 years after eBay exited and withdrew from China, in 2017, on November 11th, Taobao generated over $25 billion in GMV just on that day, just on that single day. In comparison, for the entire quarter of Q3, eBay generated $21 billion. So that's the point of comparison. And we were absolutely right about the potential of China. How did we get it so wrong in terms of execution? And WTF, what happened? So I think Jack Ma, who is the founder of Alibaba and Taobao, actually put it best and explained it really well. eBay may be a shark in the ocean, but I'm a crocodile in the Yangtze River. If we fight in the ocean, eBay wins. But if we fight in the river, we win. And he couldn't have been more right about this. So as I mentioned earlier, eBay applied its standard international expansion playbook in China. So what is that playbook? So it is, again, put yourself in the mindset of eBay. It had acquired companies and grew companies in various markets around the world, and this was a winning playbook. It would focus on a strategy around listing fees, commission fees, in terms of user acquisition, focus on traditional online first user acquisition models like SEM, SEO, email, and applied standard marketplace principles and policies, such as focusing on minimizing gray market activity. These were straightforward, standard, made sense in every market, and again, eBay had acquired a company that had 80% market share. So the dominance allowed them to be able to implement all of these policies. Why didn't it work in China? So let's just take a step back and think about the market dynamics in China at the time. So eBay was focusing on this 90 million online market in China, which at the time, 90 million is a huge market. It was bigger than UK, Germany. It was second only to the US. So it focused on email, marketing, SEM, SEO. But in the broader China market, 90 million was a drop in the bucket. Compared to just mobile users alone, that was 300 million users used mobile, but only 90 million were online. And Taobao knew this and focused on advertising campaigns reaching mobile users to move them online versus only focusing on the 90 million users who were already online. And then obviously the broader, bigger market of 1.3 billion is exponentially bigger. So while eBay was focusing on just optimizing the users who were already online, the early adopters, Taobao knew the potential was much, much, much bigger. So the underlying assumption of market dominance that eBay had was completely premature. That's number one. Number two, obviously, eBay knew that users in China were very different. And as a product manager working in China alongside a lot of my Chinese coworkers, we all knew the Chinese users were very different as well. But I don't think anyone really understood how different they were when we made the decision, the initial decision to migrate eBay onto the global platform. So who are these Chinese buyers? Well, they were pretty different from your average online user in the States or in Europe. Number one, they really didn't trust sellers at all, full stop. In fact, in eBay, one of the mottos within eBay is that all people are basically good. You can trust people, and online is a great vehicle to connect people and bring out the best in each other. In China, in our eBay China office, we would joke with each other that all people were basically bad until proven otherwise. And Chinese buyers really felt this way. So they didn't believe that just because somebody was selling something online on EachNet that meant that it could be trusted. They didn't trust people just by the nature of them being online. And Chinese users didn't really want to use auction format. Who has time to wait 7 days to buy something? And fixed price, everything is negotiable in China. There's nothing that's not negotiable. And people want a deal. And then actually, the most basic level, most people didn't even have credit cards. So the concept of online payment just did not make sense. And then users had also very different expectations of online transactions. They had very high expectations, surprisingly. So when we talk about Prime, delivery, next day delivery, well, Chinese users, even back then, they expected products to be shipped in hours, not in days. And again, they really needed to communicate with sellers, and they wanted to haggle. And lastly, because they had high penetration adoption of mobile devices, they really wanted to chat and text message, not necessarily talk in person, but definitely not using email. So all of these things made the Chinese buyers very, very different from our average eBay user. And our team, on the product side, we knew this. We tried to build features to tailor to the Chinese user. However, we would have to go through this chain of getting something prioritized, developed in San Jose, shipped back to China. By the time we shipped something back into the China market, it was already 3 months too late, right? So obviously, this was a huge disadvantage. So what did Taobao do in this vacuum? They focused on localizing e-commerce for the Chinese user. They had negotiation. They built an app that facilitated communication between buyers and sellers, which was a huge no-no on eBay. And this proved to be transformative for e-commerce. They had a lot of alternative payment methods that made sense for China market, like escrow, which gave buyers a lot more confidence, and like cash on delivery. And then logistics services, they invested in very heavily early on, while eBay actually never wanted to worry about shipping and be involved in shipping. And then lastly, of course, it was free. So remember I talked about eBay's monetization strategy, listing fees, commission fees, made sense in every market. Well, in China, Taobao was bold enough to just give it away for free. Did not charge sellers for listing fees, did not charge sellers for commission. Why? We were dumbfounded. We thought, there's no way this is a sustainable model. They will definitely run out of money, and we will recoup any market share we lost. Well, we were wrong. We know how that story ends because Taobao focused on the 1.3 billion. They were not worrying about the 90 million. And Taobao continued to evolve its product. In fact, the Messenger app that I mentioned started 10 years ago is now a standalone app. It allows buyers and sellers to communicate on this app and share video, share content. And in fact, the 25 billion GMV Taobao generated on November 11th, 90% was via mobile. This app generated significant portion of that GMV. So Taobao has continued its not only innovation, but focus on hyper-localized experiences for the China market. It may or may not work for other markets, but it definitely understands its own audience and market. So ultimately, why did we fail as a company in China? And unfortunately, we failed at some basic product principles and basic product 101. We didn't understand our users, in this case, Chinese buyers, and we didn't understand not only the potential of the China market, but also where we were in the China market, our position in the market. That, in fact, 80% dominance in a very, very premature market meant nothing in the grand scheme of things. So last note, I want to leave you guys with an image that I saw all the time, every day in China, and it really captured the essence of living in China, struggling in China, but also product development in China as well. And so this is something, how many of you guys have visited China and have seen this on the streets? Okay, a number of you guys, right? So there's always some guy or some woman on their teeny tiny bicycle carrying like 100 boxes or styrofoam boxes or regular boxes. And you're like, there is no way that they're going to be able to get from point A to point B, and this is like a sustainable thing. And it actually works. It continues to work, even though there are a lot of other advanced technologies and options available. But this is sort of how it felt as a product manager competing against a company like Taobao. They were so scrappy. Most of the features they launched initially didn't work, didn't make sense, but they just continued to innovate and continue to execute. So be scrappy, just keep moving.